The fog of 19th-century London had a taste. It was a grimy, metallic flavor of coal smoke, damp wool, and the ever-present chill of the Thames. For Arthur Penhaligon, a young man of 20, it was the taste of his life. His world was a cramped room in a lodging house where the dampness crept into your bones. And his days were spent on the docks, his muscles screaming under the strain of hauling crates for a pittance that barely kept him alive. His daily luxury was a halfpenny loaf of bread. It was never fresh. It was the day-old bread, hard as a rock, that the baker sold off cheap. Each evening, Arthur would sit on his lumpy straw mattress, break off a piece, and chew. He chewed slowly, deliberately, making it last. This lump of stale bread was the sum total of his labor, the physical manifestation of his existence. One evening, as the gnawing hunger in his stomach warred with the ache in his back, he held the last crust in his calloused palm. He looked at it, truly looked at it, and something inside him snapped. This was not living, this was surviving, and he was tired of surviving. No more, he whispered into the cold, empty room. The words were a ghost of a sound, yet they carried the weight of a sacred vow. This is the last time my entire day's worth is no more than stale bread. I will escape this. I don't know how, but I will. That vow became a fire in his belly, a desperate warmth against the cold of his reality. He began to save. It was an act of brutal self-denial. It meant skipping the halfpenny loaf some nights, enduring the dizzying emptiness in his gut. It meant working until his hands bled to take on extra shifts. Penny by agonizing penny, he collected a small, pitiful hoard of coins, hiding them in a loose floorboard beneath his bed. He had no plan, only a burning desire for more. The first turning point came in the form of a man named Silas, a fellow dockworker with shifty eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. He spoke in hushed, exciting tones of a new shipping venture. A new world, Arthur. Spices from the Indies, Silas whispered one day, leaning close. The captain is seeking small investors. A guaranteed return, he says. Double your money in a single voyage. The lords and ladies, they do this all the time. This is our chance to live like them. Double his money. The words rang in Arthur's ears like a church bell. It was the miracle he had been praying for. It was the how. Ignoring a faint, nagging doubt in his mind, Arthur saw only the destination, a life beyond the docks and the stale bread. That night, he pulled out his entire savings. It was a small fortune to him, a pittance to anyone else. With a trembling hand and a heart full of hope, he gave it all to Silas. He waited. Days turned into weeks. He saw Silas less and less. The man's confident smile was replaced by a nervous twitch. One morning, Silas was gone. The ship, the captain, the guaranteed return, it was all a phantom. A lie spun to catch desperate men. Arthur's savings had vanished. The despair was a physical blow. It was worse than hunger, colder than the winter fog. He had not just lost money, he had lost his hope. The fire in his belly was extinguished, leaving only cold, bitter ash. He had worked, he had sacrificed, and his reward was to be made a fool. The world, it seemed, was designed to keep men like him exactly where they were. He fell back into the rhythm of his old life. But now, even the halfpenny loaf felt like a mark of his failure. It was in this state of numb defeat that he stumbled upon Mr. Elias Vance. Mr. Vance owned a small, quiet bookshop tucked away on a side street, a world away from the chaotic docks. The shop was an oasis of order and silence. Arthur, seeking shelter from a sudden downpour, found himself staring through the window at the old man, who was meticulously marking entries in a large leather-bound ledger. Driven by a strange impulse he didn't understand, Arthur entered. The bell above the door chimed softly. "Can I help you, young man?" Mr. Vance asked, looking up over his spectacles. His voice was calm and steady. Arthur's own voice came out as a croak. I'm looking for work. Anything. I can sweep the floors, carry boxes." Mr. Vance studied him for a long moment. He didn't see just another ragged dockworker. He saw the raw desperation, but also a flicker of something else in the young man's eyes, a buried intelligence. A deep-seated shame. I have no need for a sweeper. Mr. Vance said slowly. But tell me, what can you do? I can lift, Arthur said, his shoulders slumping. I'm strong. Your body is strong. Yes, Mr. Vance corrected gently, but that is a tool you are renting out for pennies an hour. A tool that wears down. What else can you do? Can you read, write? Can you manage numbers? Arthur flushed with shame. A little, not well. Mr. Vance nodded, as if expecting this answer. The poor man rents out his body. The rich man commands his mind. You have been renting out your strength and it has left you with nothing. Your mistake was not in wanting more, but in thinking that more money was the answer. It is not. Money is a tool, like a hammer. Giving a hammer to a man who doesn't know how to build a house is useless. First, you must learn to be a carpenter. The words struck Arthur with the force of a physical blow. A carpenter. He had been trying to buy a house without even knowing how to hold a nail. How? Arthur whispered, his voice thick with emotion. How'd I learn? Seeing the genuine plea in his eyes, Mr. Vance's expression softened. You will continue your work at the docks. It is your income, for now, but you will give me 2 evenings a week. I will not pay you in coin. I will pay you in knowledge. I will teach you to read properly, to write a clear hand, and to understand the language of numbers. This is your first and most important investment. Thus began Arthur's true education. After a grueling 12-hour day of physical labor, he would drag his exhausted body to the quiet bookshop. By the flickering light of an oil lamp, Mr. Vance would guide him through the alphabet, through basic arithmetic, through the structure of a sentence. It was tortuous. His mind, unaccustomed to such work, would feel foggy. His eyes would burn. Many nights, he wanted to quit, to return to the simple oblivion of his room. But then he would remember the taste of the stale bread and the sting of Silas's betrayal. And he would push on. Mr. Vance was a patient but firm teacher. Do not simply save your pennies, Arthur, he would say, tapping a page of his ledger. A penny saved is just a penny. A penny invested in a skill becomes a shilling. A shilling invested in knowledge becomes a pound. Your greatest asset is not in that floorboard. It is the 6 inches between your ears. You must increase its value. He taught Arthur the fundamental difference in mindset. The poor think about how to spend their money. The rich think about how to make their money create more money. They buy assets, things that put money into their pockets. The poor buy liabilities, things that take money out of their pockets. A fancy coat you don't need is a liability. This book, he said, holding up a simple book on accounting, is an asset. It will pay you back 100 times over. Months turned into a year. Arthur's reading became fluid, his handwriting elegant, and his grasp of numbers solid. He was no longer just a body. He had begun to build his mind. One evening, Mr. Vance closed the ledger and looked at him. A clerk at the shipping company I use is leaving his post. He said, the work requires a sharp mind and a steady hand with ledgers. It pays 3 times what you earn on the docks. The position is yours, if you want it. Arthur's heart swelled with a pride he had never known. He had done it. He had increased his value. He had become a carpenter. The new job was a revelation. He worked indoors, away from the biting wind. He used a pen, not his muscles. His income grew, and for the first time, he had a surplus. After paying for his modest room and board, he had money left over. And with this initial success came a new, more subtle challenge. The temptation to spend was immense. He could afford a new coat, better shoes, meals with meat in them. He could finally look the part of a city clerk. His old friend from the docks, a man named Finn, would clap him on the back and say, "Come on, Arthur, you've made it. Let's go to the tavern and celebrate. What good is money if you don't enjoy it?" It was the siren song of his old life. The mindset of spending whatever you had because tomorrow was uncertain. He looked at Finn, a good man with a weary face, and saw his own past. He saw the cycle Mr. Vance had described. "Thank you, Finn, but not tonight," Arthur said, his voice quiet but firm. "I have other plans for this money." The look of confusion on Finn's face was painful, a sign of the growing chasm between their worlds. But Arthur held firm to his new principles. He continued to live simply. well below his new means. He remembered Mr. Vance's words: first, build your foundation, buy assets, not trinkets. He allocated his new income with the precision he used on his ledgers. A portion for living expenses, a portion for savings, his emergency fund, and a third portion, the most important one, for investment. His first investment wasn't in some risky venture. It was in himself. He paid a tutor to teach him the basics of economics and trade. He spent his evenings reading the newspapers, not for gossip, but for shipping news, for commodity prices, for the rhythm of the market. His first financial investment was small and deliberate, guided by his own research and a quiet word of advice from Mr. Vance. He bought a single share in a well-established printing press. It was boring. It was stable. It wasn't going to double his money overnight. 3 months later, a letter arrived for him. Inside was a small payment, his first dividend. It was only a few shillings. But to Arthur, it was the most beautiful money he had ever seen. He had not lifted a single crate for it. He had not worked an extra hour. His money, guided by his knowledge, had worked for him. It was a miracle, but one born not of luck, but of discipline and education. Years passed. Arthur never became a tycoon, a lord of industry. That was never his goal. But he rose steadily. He became a trusted chief clerk, his advice sought by merchants. He moved out of the lodging house into a small, clean apartment of his own. He built a diversified portfolio of small, solid assets, a few more shares in the press, a stake in a tool-making company, a small rental property in a growing part of the city. He had a safety net, a growing stream of income that was independent of his daily labor. He was in control. One evening, he sat at his own simple wooden table in his own kitchen. He had prepared a meal for himself: fresh bread, a slice of cheese, and a small piece of roasted chicken. As he took the first bite of the warm, soft bread, his mind flashed back 2 decades to that cold, desperate young man chewing on a rock-hard, half-penny loaf. The vow he had made then had been a vow to escape poverty. But the journey had taught him something deeper. He hadn't just escaped poverty, he had defeated the mindset of poverty. Poverty wasn't just an absence of coin, it was an absence of knowledge. A lack of discipline, a surrender to circumstance. The wealthy weren't necessarily smarter or better, but they understood the rules of the game. They knew that your time was more valuable than your money, that a book was a better investment than a bottle of wine, and that the greatest engine for wealth was your own mind. He had traded his strong back for a sharp mind. He had learned to use money as a tool, time as an asset, and relationships as a source of wisdom. He had escaped the gravity of his birth, not by a stroke of luck, but by a deliberate, painful, and glorious process of self-creation. He finished his meal, a feeling of profound, quiet gratitude washing over him. The fog was still outside his window, but for Arthur Penhaligon, it no longer had a taste. His world was clear, and he was finally, truly, free. He had learned that the path out of poverty isn't paved with gold, but with knowledge, and it doesn't begin with a lucky break, but with a vow, and the courage to invest in the only asset that no one can ever take from you, yourself.